The emergency klaxons had been silent for exactly 47 minutes when Staff Sergeant Riley Kowalski's boots made contact with the airlock of Research Station Meridian's Edge Asterisk. His team's magnetic soles clanked against the metal decking with the rhythmic precision of a funeral march, though Riley preferred to think of it as more of a cautious waltz. After all, dancing into potentially hostile territory required a certain finesse, even if your partner might be armed with plasma cannons. "Atmospheric readings are nominal," whispered Corporal Martinez through the comm, her voice crackling with the distinctive static that meant they were still 3 hours from the nearest communication relay. "Life support's running, but power fluctuations suggest we're looking at maybe 6 hours before this tin can become a very expensive coffin." Riley nodded, though the gesture was lost inside his helmet. The station stretched before them like a metallic whale's ribcage, all curved corridors and organic-looking support struts that seemed to pulse with their own bioluminescent rhythm. Whoever had designed asterisk meridians, Edge had clearly believed that research facilities should feel more like living organisms than sterile laboratories. Riley wasn't sure if that was inspiring or deeply unsettling. "Remember, people," he murmured into his comm, "we're here for data retrieval, not heroics. The eggheads back at command want those quantum encryption files, and they want them before our new neighbors from the Kepler Confederation decide to drop by for an uninvited house-warming party." Private Chen snorted softly. "Think they serve good snacks at alien house parties, Sarge?" "Probably depends on whether we're the guests or the appetizers," Riley replied, earning a nervous chuckle from his team. Humor was like portable atmosphere in situations like this. You carried it with you because you never knew when you might run out of the regular kind. They moved deeper into the station, past laboratories where experiments sat frozen mid-process. In the hydroponics bay, tomato plants floated in perfect spheres of nutrient solution, their roots forming delicate fractals in the zero-gravity sections where the artificial gravity generators had failed. Riley caught himself admiring the accidental beauty of it all. There was something poetic about vegetables that had learned to grow in 3 dimensions. "Motion sensors are picking up something weird," Martinez reported, her voice dropping to that particular tone that meant weird was probably an understatement. "Central Command Section. Single life form, but the readings are strange." "Strange how?" Riley asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. "Heart rate so low it's barely registering. Respiratory function is minimal. Either someone's in deep cryosleep without the cryopod, or we're dealing with someone who's mastered the art of playing dead really, really well." Riley felt his pulse quicken, which seemed unfair given that someone else was apparently conserving theirs so efficiently. Could be a trap, could be a survivor in shock, could be someone practicing for the galaxy's most boring meditation championship. "My money's on the meditation thing," Chen whispered. "I heard some of those outer colony types can slow their metabolism to almost nothing. Learned it from watching space whales or something equally ridiculous." They approached the central command chamber with the careful deliberation of people who had learned that the universe's sense of humor tended toward the explosive. The doors had been left open, which Riley found either very welcoming or very ominous. In his experience, important rooms didn't usually advertise their accessibility. The command chamber was a circular space dominated by a captain's chair that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. Organic curves flowed into technological interfaces with the seamless integration that marked truly advanced engineering. And sitting in that chair, as if she had been waiting for them specifically, was a woman. Riley's first thought was that she was beautiful in the way that certain mathematical equations were beautiful, precise, elegant, and slightly incomprehensible. His second thought was that her ears were wrong. Not wrong in a medical sense, but wrong in a human sense. They were elongated, tapering to delicate points that caught the emergency lighting and seemed to channel it into something almost luminescent. She wore clothing that seemed to shift between midnight blue and starlight silver as she moved, as if the fabric contained actual stellar phenomena. No rank insignia, no unit patches, no identification tags. Just an outfit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who understood that clothes should complement the wearer's relationship with the cosmos. "Ma'am," Riley said, his military training automatically engaging, "I'm Staff Sergeant Kowalski, Colonial Marines. Are you injured? Do you require assistance?" The woman turned to look at him, and Riley felt like he was being evaluated by someone who had access to criteria he couldn't even imagine. Her smile was patient, amused, and somehow knowing in a way that made him feel like he'd just asked whether water was wet. "That's very kind of you, Sergeant," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place, something that suggested she had learned human languages from multiple sources and had decided to blend them into something uniquely her own. "I'm quite well, thank you, though I suspect you might be feeling a bit out of your depth." Riley tried to process her presence through military protocols. Unknown personnel in restricted areas usually fell into specific categories: friendlies, hostiles, or civilians requiring evacuation. This woman didn't seem to fit any of those categories. She felt more like a force of nature that had decided to take human shape for convenience. "Ma'am, I need to ask, are you military?" The question felt inadequate even as he asked it, like trying to categorize an ocean by asking if it was a particularly large puddle. Her smile widened, and Riley caught a glimpse of something vast and complex behind those eyes. Amusement, yes, but also depths that seemed to stretch beyond the visible spectrum. "Above that," she said simply, and somehow those two words contained implications that made Riley's understanding of hierarchy seem quaint and provincial. "Above that." The words hung in the recycled air like a riddle wrapped in an enigma and served with a side of cosmic uncertainty. Riley found himself staring at this woman. Lyrale, she had introduced herself. No surname, no rank designation, just a single name that seemed to carry more weight than his entire military service record. "Above military," Riley repeated slowly, the way someone might test the structural integrity of a bridge by poking it with a stick. "So you're what? Intelligence, special operations. One of those black budget programs that doesn't officially exist, but somehow has better coffee than the regular mess halls." Lyrale's laugh was like hearing music from a species that had evolved past the need for traditional instruments. "Your coffee is terrible, by the way. I've sampled it from 17 different human outposts, and I'm convinced you're using it as some form of endurance training." Riley blinked. 17 outposts? "Ma'am, with respect, our operational security protocols should make that impossible unless you're—" "Unless I'm what, Sergeant?" She leaned forward in the captain's chair, those elongated ears twitching slightly as if they were picking up frequencies his equipment couldn't detect. "Please do continue. I find human assumptions about impossibility absolutely fascinating." "Unless you're not human," Riley finished, feeling like he'd just announced that space was big and dark and full of things that probably didn't appreciate surprise visits from armed humans. "Oh, I'm definitely not human," Lyrale confirmed cheerfully. "Though I appreciate the compliment. You've certainly mastered the art of walking upright and making tools, which is more than can be said for several species I could mention. The Zephyrians, for instance, never quite figured out wheels. Brilliant mathematicians, but they insisted on calculating the optimal transportation solutions instead of just rolling things around like sensible beings." Riley felt his worldview performing what could only be described as an emergency recalibration. First contact protocols had covered a lot of scenarios, but they'd been notably silent on what to do when the alien in question seemed more interested in critiquing human beverage choices than establishing formal diplomatic relations. "Ma'am," he began, then stopped. "Is ma'am appropriate? I mean, do you have preferred pronouns, ranks, titles that won't accidentally start an interstellar incident?" "Lyrale works perfectly fine," she said, rising from the chair with a fluid grace that made human movement look like amateur puppetry. "Though I suppose if you're feeling formal, you could try your luminescence, or she who harmonizes the stellar frequencies. But those tend to make conversations drag on forever." She moved to a control panel that Riley hadn't noticed before, or perhaps it hadn't existed before. The technology in this room seemed to operate on principles that made quantum mechanics look like elementary arithmetic. Her fingers danced across surfaces that responded with lights that definitely weren't in any spectrum his equipment could analyze. "What are you doing?" Riley asked, trying to keep the nervous edge out of his voice. Military training suggested that unknown aliens touching mysterious technology was generally bad for human life expectancy. "Fixing your life support," Lyrale replied matter-of-factly. "The station's environmental systems are failing, and while I can survive in vacuum for extended periods, you become rather unhappily deceased in about 4 hours. Plus, dying would make this conversation significantly less entertaining." The air around them suddenly felt fresher, and Riley's suit sensors confirmed that atmospheric pressure had stabilized at optimal levels. The gravity fluctuations that had been making his stomach perform involuntary acrobatics smoothed out to a steady, comfortable pull. "How did you?" "Trade secret," Lyreley said with a wink. "Well, not really a secret. More like a basic understanding of how technology should work when you stop trying to force it into submission and start asking it nicely instead. Your species has a tendency to bully your machines into compliance. It's rather endearing, in a primitive sort of way." Riley's comm crackled with static, then went dead. He tapped the side of his helmet, hoping to restore contact with his team, but the silence stretched on with the finality of a cosmic practical joke. "Don't worry," Lyreley said, apparently reading his concern with the casual ease of someone checking the weather. "They're perfectly safe. I've just established a localized space-time distortion around the station. Think of it as a privacy bubble. Prevents unwanted interruptions while we have our little chat." "A space-time distortion." Riley repeated the words like someone trying to pronounce a foreign language they'd only heard in fever dreams. "You just casually created a space-time distortion." "Oh, it's not that impressive," Lyreley said modestly. "Any decent university physics student could manage it with the right equipment." "Well, any decent university physics student from a civilization that's progressed beyond using controlled explosions for propulsion. No offense." "None taken," Riley replied automatically, then realized he might actually be offended on behalf of controlled explosions everywhere. "Wait, what's wrong with rockets?" "Nothing wrong exactly. They're just so energetic, like trying to perform surgery with a hammer. Technically possible, but there are more elegant solutions." She gestured toward the main view screen, which had remained dark since they'd boarded the station. "Would you like to see something genuinely impressive?" Before Riley could answer, the screen flickered to life, revealing the space around Meridian's edge asterisk. What he saw made his brain perform the intellectual equivalent of a hard restart. The empty void he'd expected was filled with ships, dozens of them, arranged in perfect geometric formations that seemed to dance through space with the coordinated precision of a cosmic ballet company. The vessels themselves defied every principle of ship design Riley thought he understood. They looked grown rather than built, their hulls flowing in organic curves that seemed to shift and adapt as he watched. Some appeared to be made of crystalline structures that captured and refracted starlight into patterns of impossible beauty. Others looked like they were constructed from solidified music, their surfaces rippling with harmonics that somehow translated into visual movement. "My fleet," Lyreley said casually, as if she were pointing out a particularly nice garden. "Well, one of them. I have several others stationed throughout this sector. Maintaining peaceful borders requires a certain amount of presence." Riley stared at the display, trying to count vessels and failing as new ships seemed to phase into visibility from dimensions his eyes couldn't quite track. "How many?" "Oh, a few thousand in this immediate area," Lyreley said with the tone someone might use to discuss their stamp collection. "Nothing too ostentatious. I find that overwhelming displays of force tend to make first contact situations rather tense. Better to start with just enough firepower to ensure everyone remains polite." "Middle management." Riley stared at the fleet of impossible ships dancing through space outside the view screen and tried to reconcile the concept of middle management with technology that apparently treated the laws of physics like friendly suggestions. In his experience, middle management involved a lot of paperwork and complaints about the coffee machine. It rarely involved casual manipulation of space-time. "Middle management," he said slowly. "Of what exactly?" "A shipping company. An interstellar corporation. The universe's most efficient travel agency." "The Astral Confederation," Lyreley replied, settling back into the captain's chair as if it had been specifically designed for her comfort. Which Riley was beginning to suspect it probably had been. "We're a cooperative alliance of species that have discovered the remarkable benefits of not trying to kill each other over territorial disputes." "How many species?" Riley asked, though he wasn't sure his sanity could handle the answer. 43 at last count, though the melodic crystallines are still debating whether they qualify as one species or a musical ensemble that achieved sentience. They're very philosophical about their existence. Also, they sound absolutely beautiful when they're having existential crises. Riley felt his worldview expanding at a rate that was probably unhealthy for his psychological well-being. "And you manage all of them?" "Oh, goodness, no," Lyreley laughed. "Can you imagine the scheduling conflicts? No, I handle diplomatic relations for about 17 star systems." It's challenging work, but someone has to make sure the thermal dancers don't accidentally melt the ice worlds when they're performing their mating rituals. The casual way she mentioned 17 star systems made Riley's brain perform what could only be described as a protective shutdown. He'd spent his entire military career thinking in terms of planets, maybe solar systems if he was feeling ambitious. 17 star systems fell into the category of problems so large they required new mathematics just to contemplate them properly. The thing is, Lyreley continued, apparently oblivious to Riley's ongoing cognitive crisis, your species has reached a rather interesting point in your development. You've achieved interstellar travel, which is impressive. You've established colonies, which shows initiative. But you've also managed to bring all your worst habits with you, which is, well, it's actually quite typical but still disappointing. Our worst habits: the territorial expansion, the resource competition, the tendency to shoot first and ask questions later. Though I must say, your military protocols are refreshingly direct. The ethereal councils spent 3 centuries debating the proper etiquette for saying hello to new species. You just point weapons at things and demand identification. It's crude, but efficient. Riley wasn't sure if he'd been complimented or insulted. We're just trying to protect our colonies. The galaxy's a dangerous place. Oh, it absolutely is, Lyreley agreed cheerfully. Filled with black holes, solar flares, cosmic radiation, and at least 6 species that consider violence a form of artistic expression. But most of the danger comes from civilizations that assume everyone else is dangerous. It's a fascinating cycle of mutually assured paranoia. The view screen flickered, and Riley watched as one of the crystal ships performed what could only be described as a pirouette through 3 dimensions that shouldn't have been accessible to matter as humans understood it. The movement was so graceful it made ballet look like falling downstairs. How long have you been watching us? Riley asked. Since your first interstellar probe left Sol system, Lyreley said. We always monitor new species once they start poking around in space. Most civilizations go through a phase where they're convinced they're alone in the universe, followed by a phase where they're convinced everyone wants to conquer them. You're right on schedule. And what happens next in the schedule? Well, that depends on you, really. Some species learn to play nicely with others. They discover that cooperation tends to be more profitable than conflict, and that sharing resources often creates more resources to share. Others, she gestured vaguely at the fleet outside. Others require more direct intervention. Riley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Intervention. Nothing dramatic, Lyreley assured him. We're not in the business of extinction, but sometimes we have to establish quarantine protocols. Isolate aggressive species until they either evolve past their violent tendencies or, well, until they evolve past existing entirely. Natural selection operates on a galactic scale too. And which category do humans fall into? That's what we're here to determine. Lyreley stood and moved to another control panel, her elongated ears twitching as she seemed to listen to something beyond Riley's perception. Your species shows promise. You've developed remarkable technologies, you've demonstrated creativity and adaptability, and you make genuinely excellent music. The Harmonic Resonance Collective is particularly fond of your jazz compositions. Riley blinked. Aliens listen to our jazz. Oh yes. Kind of Blue by Miles Davis is considered a masterpiece of interspecies emotional communication. The empathic nebula dwellers literally change color when they hear it. It's quite beautiful, actually. The idea that alien civilizations were sitting around listening to Miles Davis while debating humanity's fitness for galactic citizenship was so surreal that Riley's military training simply gave up and went to lie down somewhere quiet. But, Lyreley continued, you also have some concerning tendencies. The weapons development, the environmental destruction, the way you treat your own species who look or think differently. It suggests you might not be ready for the responsibilities that come with cosmic citizenship. What kind of responsibilities? Oh, the usual. Don't destabilize star systems, don't accidentally create black holes, don't introduce invasive species to other worlds, don't start wars over philosophical differences. Basic galactic etiquette, really. Most species pick it up naturally once they realize they're part of something larger than themselves. Riley's comm system suddenly crackled back to life. Martinez's voice cutting through the static with the urgency of someone who had been trying to reach him for quite some time. Sarge, where the hell are you? We lost contact over an hour ago, and these readings don't make any sense. It looks like the entire station is surrounded by some kind of energy field. The most important conversation in human history, as it turned out, began with Lyreley asking if Riley wanted tea. Not the synthesized approximation that passed for beverages on military vessels, but actual tea, brewed from leaves that had apparently grown on worlds where the concept of caffeine had evolved into something approaching art form. It helps with perspective, she explained, producing a delicate cup that seemed to be made from crystallized starlight. When you're about to discuss the fate of an entire species, proper hydration becomes essential. Plus, it gives your hands something to do while your brain processes information that shouldn't technically be possible. Riley accepted the cup, noting that the liquid inside shifted colors as he watched, cycling through shades that didn't exist in any spectrum he'd studied. Is this going to alter my consciousness? Because I should probably mention that military regulations have strong opinions about unknown substances. Only in the sense that good tea tends to make people think more clearly, Lyreley replied, settling back into her chair with her own cup. Though I suppose clarity of thought could be considered a form of consciousness alteration, depending on your previous baseline. The tea tasted like morning sunlight with hints of cosmic wonder, which was either the most poetic flavor profile Riley had ever experienced or evidence that his sanity had finally decided to take an extended vacation. Either way, he found himself relaxing in ways that military training had specifically designed to prevent. So, he said, job interview for the human race. Do we need to prepare a resume? References from previous planetary civilizations. We haven't accidentally offended. Actually, we've been compiling your resume for quite some time, Lyreley said, gesturing toward the view screen where data streams began flowing in patterns that somehow managed to be both incomprehensible and oddly beautiful. Let's see, technological innovation impressive, cultural diversity fascinating, artistic achievements genuinely remarkable, tendency to solve problems by hitting them with larger problems. Well, that's concerning but not unprecedented. Riley watched humanity's greatest hits and most embarrassing moments scroll past in languages that looked like mathematics had learned to dance. What's the verdict? Mixed, Lyreley admitted. Your species shows tremendous potential, but you're also going through what we call the adolescent aggression phase. Most civilizations experience it when they first achieve interstellar capability. Suddenly you can reach other worlds, and your first instinct is to either claim them or worry that someone else will claim them first. That seems reasonable. Oh, absolutely. It's a perfectly natural response. The problem is that it tends to create unnecessary conflicts with species who have moved past the territorial acquisition stage of development. Imagine, if you will, a cosmic neighborhood where most residents have learned to share lawn mowers, and suddenly someone moves in who immediately starts building fences and installing security systems. Riley considered this metaphor while sipping tea that was apparently improving his ability to contemplate abstract concepts. So what do the other neighbors usually do? Well, that depends on the new resident's attitude toward fence removal, Lyreley said with a smile that managed to contain both patience and the subtle implication of overwhelming force. Some species are willing to learn, others require more convincing. The view screen shifted to show a three-dimensional map of local space, with human colonies marked in bright blue dots that looked rather small and lonely against the vast network of interconnected systems that apparently made up the Astral Confederation. Riley counted 17 human settlements and stopped when he realized the alien territories were measured in numbers that his mind wasn't equipped to process. Here's what we're prepared to offer, Lyreley continued, touching the display to highlight trade routes that could connect human space to the broader galactic community. Full membership in the Confederation with all the benefits that entails. Advanced technologies that will solve your energy and environmental problems. Access to knowledge that will accelerate your scientific development by centuries. Cultural exchange programs that will expand your understanding of what intelligence can become. The offer was everything humanity had dreamed of finding among the stars, delivered with the casual ease of someone offering directions to the nearest restaurant. Riley felt the weight of representing his entire species settling on his shoulders like a cosmic practical joke. And in exchange, simple behavioral modifications, Lyreley said cheerfully. Stop the aggressive territorial expansion. Implement resource-sharing protocols with other species. Establish peaceful conflict resolution mechanisms. Basically, learn to play nicely with others on a galactic scale. That's not exactly a small request. Oh, I know it seems overwhelming, Lyrale acknowledged. But consider the alternative. Continued isolation while your species exhausts its local resources and eventually either stagnates or destroys itself through internal conflicts. It's a sadly common pattern among species that can't evolve past their survival instincts. Riley found himself thinking about his military career, about all the conflicts he'd fought over resources and territory that suddenly seemed embarrassingly trivial against the backdrop of galactic civilization. How do we know we can trust you? How do we know this isn't some elaborate conquest strategy? Lyrale laughed, the sound somehow harmonizing with frequencies that made the teacups resonate musically. Riley, if we wanted to conquer humanity, this conversation would be entirely unnecessary. You've seen our fleet. You understand our technological capabilities. If conquest was our goal, we'd simply arrive, announce the new management structure, and start rearranging your planets for optimal efficiency. Instead, you're asking for our consent. Exactly. Forced cooperation tends to create resentment, rebellion, and general unpleasantness. Voluntary cooperation, on the other hand, creates genuine partnerships. We've learned that civilizations grow stronger when they choose to grow, rather than being forced into new shapes. The space-time distortion around the station began to weaken, reality bleeding back into normal parameters with the gentle inevitability of morning after a particularly vivid dream. Riley felt his comm system coming back online, his team's voices cutting through the cosmic static with questions he wasn't sure how to answer. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now you return to your people and share what you've learned," Lyrale said, rising from her chair with that fluid grace that made human movement look like amateur theater. "The Confederation will establish a diplomatic mission in your system. We'll begin cultural exchange programs, starting with species that have successfully navigated their own adolescent aggression phases. The Harmony Builders, for instance, went through a remarkably similar period about 4,000 years ago. They're excellent at teaching conflict resolution through interpretive dance. Interpretive dance. You'd be surprised how effective it is. Very difficult to maintain territorial aggression when you're required to express your grievances through graceful movement. Plus, it's excellent exercise. Riley finished his tea, noting that the cup had somehow become empty without his realizing it. The flavor lingered, along with a sense of expanded possibility that felt like looking at the ocean for the first time after a lifetime of puddles. What if humanity refuses? What if we decide we're not ready for galactic citizenship? Lyrale's expression grew thoughtful, those elongated ears tilting slightly as if listening to cosmic frequencies that carried the weight of civilization's rise and fall. "Then we wait. We've learned patience across geological timescales, Riley. If humanity needs another century or two to mature, that's perfectly acceptable. The galaxy will still be here when you're ready. And if we never become ready, then you'll join the gallery of species that chose isolation over growth," she said gently. "It's not a tragedy exactly, just a limitation, like choosing to live in a single room when the entire universe is available for exploration." The station systems were fully restored, now artificial gravity humming with perfect stability. Atmosphere recycled to levels that made each breath feel like a gift from some cosmic benefactor. Riley's team was probably wondering why their simple data retrieval mission had turned into an extended silence, followed by environmental improvements that defied explanation. "I have one last question," Riley said. "When I asked if you were military and you said above that, what did you mean exactly?" Lyrale's smile returned, carrying depths that seemed to contain the patient wisdom of someone who had spent lifetimes learning to guide civilizations toward their better angels. "I'm the Constellation Queen, Riley, the elected representative of the Astral Confederation's governing council. My authority extends across those 17 star systems I mentioned, encompassing the peaceful coexistence of 43 different species." Riley stared at her, his brain performing calculations that kept returning error messages. "You're a queen, an actual queen." "Elected queen," Lyrale corrected. "We're very democratic about our monarchy. Every few centuries, the Confederation